Hello, everyone. Welcome to Feels Out Loud, brought to you by Becoming Together Therapy and Wellness. This is Tara Martini, along with the amazing Becky McNattin. We are glad to have you listening as we live and share stories of mental health. Good morning.
Today we have guest Ryan Moravetz with us. Welcome, Ryan.
Hi,
good morning. So
Happy
glad to
be
have you here. Through the next hour, we're going to be processing the experience of grief and for children. And Ryan, grief and loss is something that you have dedicated your entire clinical career to. Currently, you work with kids who are grieving, and we have, I'm going to say, so many questions to ask you about all of this. But I wanted to start with highlighting the prevalence of grief, loss, and bereavement for kids. According to the Child Bereavement Estimation Model, in the United States, 7%, that's nearly 5 million kids, everyone, will experience the death of a parent or sibling by the age of 18. That's 1 in every 12 kids.
That's crazy.
Who will experience the death of a parent or sibling before age 18. 1 in 12. Grief, trauma, and bereavement have a massive impact on the mental health trajectory for kids. Ryan, what would you say about this statistic?
You know, I think it's a critical issue nationwide that's been long overlooked. You know, you can mention 1 in 12 in the U.S. For the listeners out there that are curious, locally in Minnesota, it's estimated that 1 in 15 children will experience the death of a parent or sibling by the time they reach 18.
1 in 15?
1 in 15. Estimated to be about 89,000 Minnesota children.
Oh, my gosh.
And when I think about 89,000 Minnesota children that will experience the death of a parent or sibling by the time they graduate high school, to be honest, it's hard for me to wrap my head around.
Yeah, well, it's an age that we don't really conceptualize grief and loss and bereavement with.
Right.
We think of childhood as an entirely different developmental stage that maybe older adults would be experiencing this. And you're noting what would be quite common then.
Right.
I mean, 1 in 15 in the state of Minnesota and 1 in 12 nationally.
Well, and when you said that number, my immediate thought was, how many of those kiddos are getting help and support via therapy or small group for their loss? And that number seems so overwhelming. I'm like, there's no way that everybody obviously could.
Yeah, and I think it's also, you know, it's heartbreaking to feel that number is even understated because that just captures the death of a parent or sibling. So death of a friend, boyfriend, girlfriend, significant caregiver such as aunts, uncles, grandparents, that's not even factored into the 1 in 15.
That's a really good point because kids would be experiencing all types of loss then if we added in the exponential factor to other types of death. In the clinical realm, we see grief and loss having this profound impact on kids' mental health. Things like depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder. And one component of this, specifically when children have experienced the death of a parent or sibling, they may have caregivers in their lives who are also processing this catastrophic loss. And the nuances for kids as they navigate a loss alongside an adult. What would you say about that, Ryan?
It's you're right. It is profound. It affects children and adults in so many ways. You know, emotionally, behaviorally, socially. You know, we see a lot of obviously emotions, anger, and sadness, kind of being the hallmark emotions of grief. But then outside of that, this withdrawal from friends, or maybe they're seeing friends and family suddenly becoming absent. You know. People tend to treat grieving like the grief is contagious. Don't get that grief around me. Don't get that sadness around. Keep that sadness to yourself. I don't want it. And that leads to isolation. That leads to loneliness. That leads to a lot of challenges in every realm of a child's life. Yeah.
Well, kids experiencing it as kind of an othering of stay away from me with whatever your feels are. And while there maybe are also trying, when we talk about grieving alongside an adult, maybe be trying to help the adult with their feels.
Oh, right. And how do they do that when they can themselves process what's going on?
Right. Well, so important to explore all of this. Right now, we're going to take a short commercial break. But stay tuned as we explore the grief experience for kids and ways you can support a grieving child in your life. Thank you for tuning in to Feels Out Loud. We will be right back.
You gotta find your people.
Welcome back, everybody, to Feels Out Loud, brought to you by Becoming Together Therapy and Wellness. I am Tara Martini, along with the oh-so-amazing Becky McNattin. Let's get right back to our discussion about grief.
So, want to jump back right into grieving children and how much you work with this, Ryan. First, I want to help listeners understand a little bit about you. Tell us about you and what you do.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys having me again here today, and just thank you for giving this conversation a platform.
Yeah.
So my name is Ryan Moravetz. I've lived in Minnesota for most of my life, worked in the corporate world for over 10 years, then kind of decided I wanted to help people rather than helping a multinational billion-dollar corporation keep product on the shelf. So about 6 years ago, I went back to grad school, fast forward to today, and I'm a licensed grief counselor for Growing Through Grief, which is a school-based program through Park Nicollet supporting students in the K-12 schools.
Okay. Wow. So you did an about face. Like, you did a big shift in, although probably in your job previously to being a grief counselor with kids, you were a person who helped your peers, right, and likely some of those similar personality traits that make you good at what you do now were present. You really found this calling to the grief world.
Yeah, no, I think it's a passion that I've developed. It's a passion that I just understand that there's just not enough resources out there. When we talked at the top of the show, 89,000 kids alone, and that number doubles by the time they reach 25. There's just not enough resources out there, so really just wanted to dedicate the rest of my life to supporting them.
That's incredible. And so, in addition to what you just said, what makes you so passionate about walking alongside kiddos and their grief journey?
Yeah, so like many people that choose to get into the grief field, I've suffered personal loss as well. My dad was killed by a drunk driver when I was 15 years old. My grandma and my uncle were also in the car that day, and they each lost their life as well. So lost 3 really important people in my life suddenly, unexpectedly on that fateful day. You know, my story is tragic, but it's not unique, and there are other stories out there just like mine.
Yeah.
I think my deepest pain is what cultivates my compassion. You know, I think it's very clear that we live in a grief-illiterate society where death and dying is mostly taboo to talk about.
Well said.
You know, to quote Brene Brown, we live in a culture where people need us to move through our grief as quickly as possible for the sake of their own comfort. And I think...
Oh, yes. Oh, say it again.
Yes.
Say that again.
We live in a culture where people need us to move through our grief as quickly as possible for the sake of their own comfort.
Yes.
Oh, so true.
And I think, you know, the problem is that we are culturally conditioned to instantly cheer somebody up. When we do that, what we're really doing is silencing the person that we care about. And so much of what the grieving population is going through is just feeling isolated, feeling lonely, feeling as though there's something wrong with them, feeling as though they're going crazy. It's really important to make sure that these folks know that they're not alone and that there are resources available. And I'm just, it's an honor to be walking alongside others and to be a grief companion on their journey so that they don't feel alone.
Yeah, well,
that's amazing.
It has me thinking about, Ryan, and thank you for sharing your personal story of what brings you to a passion about grief. So you were a grieving child.
I was.
And you know what it means to have a profound loss experience as a child. And you can, as an adult, very likely put yourself back in that space of being 15, likely instantaneously. Certainly, it allows you a deep space of empathy for kiddos who you work with. And as you said, which I want to just reiterate to listeners because it was a really poignant statement to me, you said, my deepest pain becomes my deepest compassion. Last week, Tara and I were just talking about how the deepest of one emotion can also allow us a deep experience of another emotion. And how the choice as an adult is to say, I know, I don't know your experience specifically, child, but I know what it means to be a grieving child.
Right.
And that is kind of beyond words to me. So I'm sitting with what that means to say out loud to listeners. I can feel the energy from you in the space right now. And I just want to convey how I feel the compassion and the passion in your voice. It makes me wonder, so you've lived being a grieving child yourself. You also work with grieving children. How does grief show up with kids?
Oh, that's a great question. Parents, teachers, and other caring adults, they may be expecting the grieving child to feel isolated or to be sad, but in reality, the child could be completely withdrawn, disconnected from their schoolwork, sleeping during the school day, not being able to sleep at night. When these behaviors are displayed in the classroom, students are typically penalized by it. They're being called out for not paying attention, not completing their assignments, not passing the exam, getting pulled out of class. I think it's critical for schools to be informed so that grief is not actively oppressed or punished. It's important for the listeners to know, and you guys might hear me saying this a couple times, that each child grieves in their own unique way and in their own unique timeline. So you asking how does grief show up in children, there's not a uniform set of responses that we're looking for. Aside from, emotional, social, behavioral responses, we're looking at, how does the grief affect us physically? Changes in appetite, changes in sleep, being tired, fatigued. Grief is exhausting. It takes every ounce of energy from you. It is draining. It is depleting. And then spiritually, depending on the age of the child, they might have some big questions around those why questions, questioning their faith, questioning who they are now, questioning the meaning of life. It affects every facet of life.
Well, and you highlight we sometimes penalize grief. What is actually a grief experience we see as a behavioral issue for children.
Well, and I think, too, coming from being a former teacher and school counselor, like my one bit of advice, and you might hear this and go, well, doesn't everybody? But my advice is when you experience loss, please have someone in the family reach out to the school and to share. You don't have to go into detail, but just to share that, hey, this kiddo's experiencing it. Because I can't tell you how many times as a teacher, I would have a kiddo who displayed all of those things, right? And I would get upset with the child. And then I would reach out to the school counselor and say, like, hey, what's going on with so-and-so? Like, holy cannoli. And the counselor would respond with, oh, well, they did just lose their grandpa, or whatever it was. And it was like, if I only knew, I would have handled that child with, love and compassion more and kind of holding him in the grief. So reach out. And I know that takes a step, but you don't have to be the one who does it, right? It can be another family member, an aunt or an uncle or someone that reaches out, because teachers and people within the schools, they want to know and they want to help walk alongside your child in this journey, but they need to know first.
Yeah, well said.
Yeah.
So I want to know from you, Ryan, what are things that kids need from adults, whether it is, like I said, the teacher or the school counselor or a family member, right, or a neighbor? What are things that kids need from adults while they're going through the grieving process?
Yeah, great question. You guys talk a lot about this on the show, lead with compassion and curiosity. It's important for the listeners to know that the research shows that the barometer for how well a child will grieve is dependent upon how well the caregiver is coping with the death.
Wow.
So it's really important.
It's interesting.
Yeah, I never thought about that.
It is. And I think that's where it really becomes critical for the surviving family members to model healthy grieving by allowing and validating emotional expression. It's important for adults to take the time to prepare for difficult conversations and to expect those conversations to be ongoing. It's important for adults to listen to understand rather than listening to respond. And I think it's really important to be honest. So oftentimes the story is not relayed to the kids because the parents are well-intentioned and they want to try to protect the child from feeling pain or feeling sadness, but it's really important. Children need to know the truth. Use simple, clear, age-appropriate language. It's really important to use those D words: death, dying, dead. Try not to use those euphemisms. We lost him.
Yeah.
Passed away. He fell asleep and didn't wake up. Those can be incredibly confusing for kids. And the last thing I'll share is it's really important for adults to convey to kids that the kids are not responsible for taking care of the adults in the family.
Yes.
It allows the kids to have permission to take care of themselves and to honor their own grief versus stepping into a role that they more or less inherited, where they feel like now they're the man of the house or the woman of the house because they need to try to take care of their siblings or their surviving parent.
And I'm sure that happens so often, right? That it's not their fault in that they immediately think, well, I now need to care for my mom, right? When that is such a loving thing. And of course, that's what the kiddo feels, but it is not their responsibility.
Yeah.
And oftentimes those are self-inherited. It's the child telling themselves, I need to step up, I need to be strong, I can't show weakness, I need to step in, I need to do whatever that might be. And what ends up tending to happen is they push their own grief to the side because they're trying to take care of their family.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you said something just a minute ago, listening to understand versus listening to respond, that I think we sometimes hear unbelievable questions from kids who are grieving. And when I say unbelievable questions, it's kind of, it's beyond even how did kid think about this question? And when we look at a worldview for a child, they may be asking some of these real deep meaning-making kinds of questions, as you said a few minutes ago, around what's the point of this life, or why did this happen, or things that we don't know necessarily how to answer as adults. And you said, listen to understand, not listen to respond, that perhaps the goal, and I hear this from you in terms of what do kids need, the goal isn't to have an answer for them.
Right.
The goal is to have heard them. So listening to absorb versus listening to have an answer. Some of the questions that kids are going to ask us aren't necessarily answerable. They might not fundamentally be answerable. The purpose of the child asking is to want to know that they're safe enough to even ask and question these things about the world, and that they can be curious and big feelers with the adults in their life that maybe don't have a response. And so I just want to point out that was a big suggestion that I think is a really thoughtful nugget for people to take away in what are kinds of things that kids need who are grieving. They need just you to listen without having an eloquent answer. Just be present, be alongside, be with.
Well, and like you said, in addition to that, and be honest. Like Ryan said.
Yes, use
and
the words.
Be honest.
Yes.
And it is also okay to say that we don't have the answer.
Yeah.
Right? Don't make up an answer. Right. It's honesty is saying, I don't know either, honey.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
I wonder that same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if anything, when you allow yourself to understand and to appreciate that it's okay to not have all the answers, you're actually allowing further questioning, because if you respond to the child by saying, I don't have the answers, it's giving them permission to continue to search for them, right? You're not trying to put an end to it by saying, here's the answer. And it's important for each child to have that experience to search for those answers as long as they want, even though those answers can be really hard to find sometimes.
Right.
Yeah. You said that a grief experience for kids is really across the board. It's super unique and individual to who they are. And in some ways, as you were just talking, highlights a lot of how the uniqueness could be for adults too, as they are grieving. But are there things that make grief different for kids than adults?
Really good question. You guys are coming with some good hitters.
That's what we do.
Yeah, that's our job.
I think first it's important to understand just how important play-based activities are for children. You know, play is a child's natural way to learn and explore their world. In fact, a lot of adults are often confused because they share the news of the death, and there's an apparent lack of feelings. The child may respond with emotional shock, and then they decide they want to go back and play. And adults are often confused by that, and they're wondering, well, why is there such indifference to this news? And it's the child's way of grieving. It's the child's way of processing what they just had. They're learning through play. They're exploring their world through play. I think it's important for listeners to understand that children will experience grief over the death of a significant person at different times throughout their development. We see this a lot with younger kids, where maybe the death happened when they don't quite understand the finality of death. And then as they continue to develop, they start to understand what death really means. And with that comes a new lens, right? You're looking at your grief through a different lens because you understand the irreversibility of it. You think about those significant milestones in an adolescent's life. Maybe they decide to get their driver's license. Maybe they decide to go to prom. They graduate high school. Maybe they decide they want to go to college. Maybe they decide they want to buy a house. Maybe they decide they want to start a family. Each of these big milestones comes with it grief burst. It's a term that's used a lot in the grief field, this idea that our grief ambushes us at inopportune times where we're just going about our day and suddenly we see something, we smell something, we hear something that reminds us of our person, and the grief just hits us like a brick in the face. So it's important for listeners to understand that children will grieve throughout their lifetime, as will adults. But with children, it can look different because developmentally they might not fully understand the concept of death. The last thing I wanted to share, and you kind of touched on it right at the top of the show, Becky, is sadly, children are often referred to as the forgotten grievers. They are frequently ignored or dismissed. I can't tell you how many stories I've heard of children that weren't allowed to attend the funeral. They're just shipped to aunt and uncle's house.
Yeah.
I think...
we hear that a lot in the therapy realm, too.
Yeah, and I think, unfortunately, because our society places so much value on carrying on and self-sufficiency, oftentimes grieving children are abandoned shortly after the death. They might have someone come up to them and say, well, how's your family doing? How's your sister doing? How's your mom doing? How's your dad doing? Rarely are they asked, how are you doing?
Right.
And I think it's important for the listeners to understand if you're old enough to love, you're old enough to grieve, period.
Oh, I love that. If you're old enough to, wow.
And
amazing.
We sometimes hear kids not being included in memorials or funerals or acknowledgments of death because of a thought or a socialization around it. It's quiet or it's supposed to be a certain way.
Or you're protecting them.
Yes, and how that actually can be quite wounding in not being included in those experiences and moments.
Well, and think, too, of the lack of, I hate the word closure, but to never give that child the opportunity, to say goodbye in a way that a lot of people do. It is a marker. And so to kind of seal that from them is just, would change the trajectory of their grief.
Absolutely.
Is there effective grieving for kids, Ryan? Or ineffective grieving?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's important to first talk a little bit about grief versus mourning. So grief is this idea that it's the internal response we have to the death. It's the feelings and thoughts we have related to the death, but it's all going on inside our mind, right? Mourning is our ability to externalize the grief. It's our grief gone public. So the reason why I'm first mentioning this distinction between grief versus mourning is that often for children as well as adults, if they find they are grieving but they're not mourning, that's where they're likely to feel stuck. That's where they're likely to feel like they're spinning their tires.
Got it.
Human beings, we are social creatures. It's important that we do not isolate ourselves. As you guys talk about on the show, connection fosters wellness. It's important for these kids as well as adults to find opportunities to mourn. Another thought that comes to mind with effective grieving, I think it's okay to take grief breaks. Sometimes I use the metaphor of grief being a door that we keep closed, and sometimes we open the door a little bit when we let some pain in, and then when the grief gets to be too heavy, we shut the door. And then a little bit later, we want to try to open it again, and we might open it a little bit more, and then it gets to be a little bit too heavy, so we shut it again. So we're opening the door, we're closing the door. It's so important for us to honor our own pacing because we are the expert in ourselves. We know what we're capable of. We know what's too much at a certain time, and it's okay to dose your grief. It's okay to take those breaks. Tara, I think you mentioned during the Disconnect episode, you were talking about the importance of scheduling something to look forward to when you're on a grief journey.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. It's so important because that gives you joy, that gives you excitement, that gives you eagerness. Those are fleeting emotions, especially early on in grief. So to have something on the calendar to look forward to is a great way for people to be able to dose their grief. They're not going to be able to take their mind off of their person for an entire day or likely not an entire hour. But if you can even take 5 minutes where your brain's not thinking about it, it gives your brain a much needed respite. Most importantly, a lot easier said than done, but be kind to yourself. Effective grieving requires us all to find grace in ourselves. It's important for us to understand that the pain of grief is proportional to the love that we have for the person. So the more we love the person, the more painful it's going to be.
Yeah.
And it's important for us to take care of ourselves. I heard on a podcast a while back saying the trick is to be graceful when your mood is low and grateful when your mood is high.
Oh, can you say that again?
Yeah.
The trick is to be graceful when your mood is low and grateful when your mood is high.
Wow. Which is super hard because
So hard.
when in grieving experiences, when our mood is high, we can feel really guilty about that, or judge it, or tell ourselves it's wrong.
Right.
That we even get ourselves thinking that it's a way of it's dishonoring to the person
I
who
love
has died.
him less if I let some joy seep in.
Yes.
Right?
And oftentimes for a lot of people, it's easier for them to sit in those harder days to really just sulk in it. But then when they're having a better afternoon, how often are we being grateful for that moment where we aren't feeling that heaviness?
Yeah.
Wow.
The very last piece I want to touch on, because we could spend the whole show talking about effective grieving, is the importance to know that there's healing power with gratitude that oftentimes comes later on in the grief journey. But for some people that I've met, they talk about this idea that as they've journeyed down their grief, they discovered that their grief has the power to transform into gratitude. I want to share this quick quote from Henry Nouwen. He said, "Every time we make the decision to love someone, we open ourselves to great suffering, because those we most love cause us not only great joy, but also great pain.
Wow.
The greatest pain comes from leaving. The pain of leaving can tear us apart. Still, if we want to avoid the suffering of leaving, we will never experience the joy of loving."
Well said.
Well said, Henry.
Well said. Yeah. And very profound thing to put into practice. It's you're highlighting this human experience of holding love, and that so often pain and grief is rooted in deep love.
Right. And you're not finding gratitude for the death itself. You're finding gratitude in how you choose to live your life and honor that person afterwards, and recognize that it's through the love you have and the memories you have is why you're feeling the pain you have today. Again, the pain of your grief is proportional to the love that you have for the person.
Yeah. Well said.
I'm just sitting here with tears. That is so profound. That is so profound.
Are there things that you would say are misconceptions about childhood grief? Like things that adults think about or we say exist, but you get what I'm saying about misconception, right?
Yes, I would actually love to come back for another show, and we could just spend the entire episode talking about
Well, please
I think
do.
that's
about grief.
a real good idea.
I it's important to know, children do not always grieve in the same ways that adults do, or that we as the adults believe that children should grieve, right? One of the biggest misconceptions I see in families is the belief that every family member will grieve the same way because they all experienced the death of the same person.
Yeah.
And again,
yes.
Our grief is as unique as our own fingerprints. Each family member has a different internal response to stress. Each family member had a unique relationship to the person who died, so each person's grief is going to look very differently. And oftentimes that gets confusing and misleading when family members look across the table and they compare their grief to someone else's grief, and they think they might have it better or worse than the person sitting across the table.
Yeah, Ryan, just for a second. Listeners, I want you to hear what he just said. If you are grieving a loss right now, tonight, I want you to put your hand with your fellow household members, all in a circle. And I want you to say out loud that our grief is as unique as our fingerprint. You just saying that, Ryan, gives space to recognize that your grief in your household is as unique as your own finger. And a recognition that so often the grief needs of a child are going to be different from the grief needs of a caregiver or of another person in the household, and that it poses its own challenges. This is all tough to navigate, and it just is. So take that opportunity right now or this evening to put your hands right next to each other. Look at how your hands are different. And then say your grief around your person is going to be as unique as that. I wanted to just take time to mark that because what you said is poignant. And we have to be grace giving to each other for that uniqueness of the individual fingerprint of grief.
Yeah, and giving that permission, right?
Yeah, it's ultimately that
Wow, we
permission.
each have permission to grieve in our own way.
Yes.
And there's no wrong or right way.
In our own way and in our own timeline.
Yes.
Can I ask you a question that I've heard a lot, and I want to know if this is actually like a rumor or if this is true? That kiddos, when it comes to grief, I don't want to say kiddos have it easier. I don't know what word is. But because they have an easier time compartmentalizing, where as adults you look at grief and it just floods every facet of your life. And I've heard some people over time and say, well, kids are better because they can look at it like, here's my pocket for grief. Here's my pocket for school. Here's my pocket, you know.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think in a lot of ways kids are better at dosing the pain because they also understand the importance of fun and just leisure time with their friends. I also think kids are a lot better at showing their feelings.
That's a great point.
They can immerse in that experience.
Yep.
Absolutely.
And don't cognate it away.
They allow time for it.
That hasn't been conditioned out of them yet to where they don't have that armor on. They can show their feelings a little bit more openly, and I think when we are able to talk about it, it helps make it feel a little bit more manageable.
That's a great point. Thank you. Yeah.
How can adults know if therapy might be helpful for kids?
Well, I think that's a trick question.
Well, I have huge bias that therapy is important for all the people.
Well, yes, it is.
And this is tough in a grief experience because you mentioned these are going to be really intense feels. And of course, I come from a space of all things are therapy too. But I'm talking about your work specifically with kids is in a therapeutic space. How might an adult know that could be a fit?
I think it starts with just trying to identify what their support system looks like. If they have a lot of opportunities to talk about their person and they feel supported by those people, they might have an ability to mourn a little bit more openly than those who might not have someone they can trust. Right. And it's so important when you are looking to find therapy that you find a therapist that you feel that your child can have a connection with. I think there are certain elements that we are looking for, right? If there has been trauma in the death, if the child has witnessed the death or seen the body, certainly that might warrant some professional help. I also think about, when you identify that perhaps the child is using some maladaptive coping skills, substance abuse or self-harm, that would be a good indicator that probably be best to get some professional help.
Okay.
And then I think a lot of what grief brings up for kiddos and adults is existential anxiety. And when we have that heightened existential anxiety, it's important to talk with a professional that can help kind of guide us through those thoughts.
Yes.
All helpful tools there.
Right. Now, let's say an audience member is sitting with a child who is grieving. What are some ways that you found over the years that are ways that adults can help kids memorialize their loved one?
Oh, my face just lit up.
I saw that right away.
I saw it too.
It was amazing.
I love this question. I have so many ideas just flooding into my head. Depending on the person, you might decide you want to plant a tree in honor of your loved one. You might decide you want to maybe start a garden and plant a garden in memory of your loved one. If planting or gardening isn't your thing, I think about volunteering to those in need or doing random acts of kindness in using your loved one's name. Other ideas, of course, I'm in schools a lot, so I'm thinking about art projects, and I'm thinking about, making memory boxes, making scrapbooks where kids can put pictures together and describe memories they have of their loved one. Tangible things like decorating a picture frame, jewelry making, beaded bracelets where you might be able to put your your loved one's name on it. Decorating rocks.
Great idea.
Yeah, decorating rocks. You might put those decorated rocks in your garden. Making orbs. You could hang orbs up in the window or maybe on a Christmas tree if you celebrate. Maybe you're really artistic and you want to create a song. Making candles, making luminaries. Having a gratitude journal, a memory journal. Those are just some ideas.
Yeah, so you're
that was a lot of ideas in a very short amount of time. Thank you. That was impressive.
Yeah, I'm thinking about kind of the theme there is memorializing a loved one for children can help if it's externalized in an object, because you highlight many things that would be process of creating something by itself is memorializing. And then the outcome of that process is an object that child from a concrete developmental stage can look at and remember the experience or process of memorializing. So it is a thing that they have attached to a feeling. And you mentioned several different ways to do that, from journals to candles to rocks. All of them I heard from, this is a process that this child went through alongside maybe other children or an adult, a process they went through in actually immersing in the experience of whatever the feel is around that loved one. So we're sitting with kids while we do that, and we're creating something for them to attach those feelings to, which is hugely important when we consider what a memorial is, because it's an object connected to feelings.
Yeah. Yep. Well said. And I think, I go back to the beaded bracelet. If you want to try to identify feelings as you're putting the project together, maybe you use different colors of beads. Red is anger, blue is sadness, green is joy. You can talk about different memories. Maybe each bead is tied to a different memory.
Yeah.
There's a lot of ways to memorialize that. And kids can also do that in more discreet ways, too. If they don't want to be so open about it, they can just make a bracelet without the loved one's name.
Right.
And people at school don't need to know what the bracelet really is, but it holds special significance for that student.
Yes. And so tell us about Growing Through Grief.
Yeah, so Growing Through Grief started in 1997. It's a Park Nicollet program, completely free of charge to students in partnering school districts. So we are funded through the Park Nicollet Foundation, philanthropic-based. The idea behind it is that we want to try to support students at school so that it's barrier-free. We come to the schools during school hours, and students are able to leave class. It's excused absence. They can come down and join
So they
the group
come
when
during
they'd like.
the school day.
They come down during the school day. They're able to get out of class. They're not marked absent or truant. And it's an opportunity for them to talk about things that are uncomfortable to talk about, because for a lot of kids at these schools, they do feel alone. They don't know who they can talk with. They come back to school following the death of a loved one, and they tend to suffer in silence. They tend to feel like they're the only ones in the school that know what they're going through. And then to be around other students that can relate through some of those experiences, it gives these kids an opportunity to talk more openly about their loved one in a space where every student kind of gets it. And it's a no judgment zone. It's a what's said in this group stays in this group kind of room.
Safe.
It's safe for them. Right.
Because the other kids in that space, they automatically know, maybe they don't know the specifics of the loss, but that those other students are there because of that grieving experience.
Yeah. Yep. So so I was just going to say, we started in 1997. We're now a team of 8 counselors supporting
8 of you.
8 of us supporting over 800 students weekly in 128 schools in 16 school districts.
You answered my question. That was going to be my question.
I knew that question was coming, so I had to look to see how many schools we're in. And as of this morning, when I last checked, 128 schools.
So let's say we have a listener who is like, my kiddo just experienced the loss. How did they find out if this is available in their school?
Yeah, great question. You can either ask the school, or you can find our website. Just type in Growing Through Grief. It'll pull up the Park Nicollet page, and then from there you can see the list of 16 partnering school districts.
Awesome.
If your student is in a partnering school district, you can ask your student to just inform the teacher or to notify the school social worker, and then usually one of us would reach out to the student, do kind of a meet and greet to kind of get to know each other a little bit and to assess ongoing support needs. And then for students that might not be in a district, still it's important to reach out to the program, because we have lots of resources we can share with the schools around building grief groups. If we're not able to be in the schools, we have a lot of curriculum that the schools can use. So we want to make sure that we're spreading our material out to anyone that could use it.
Wow.
And
that's
you would
really amazing.
Follow up with anybody who maybe is outside of a school district that you're in, and you would share access or resources that might be available to them in their specific arena.
Exactly.
But 800 students a week, you said.
Yeah.
And there's 8 of you.
Yep.
I mean, let's do the math here. I'm not good at math, but that's a lot of kids.
Yeah, it's really cool to see
incredible.
School districts see the need for it.
Yeah. Well, and it, like you said, it supports our entire audience, right? You don't have to be in that district to feel supported.
Yes. Well, thank you for doing what you do. And it's been an amazing discussion. We are headed to a commercial break right now. But when we come back, we will talk through listener questions who are wondering about grief for children. Feels Out Loud will process your thoughts in just a moment.
You gotta find the people.
Hello, my loves. We are back again with Feels Out Loud. And this is the part of the show where we talk through questions from you all, our listeners. If you have a question related to mental wellness, sharing feelings, or topics for each week, then you would like us to process through, please visit our website at becomingtogethermn.com and look for the Feels Out Loud page to submit a question directly. Or you can email us at contact@becomingtogethermn.com. We really do want to hear from each of you and what you are wondering about.
So grateful to all of you listeners who have sent in questions about grief for children. And Ryan, we have an experience that someone emailed us about that we want to highlight to you and ask what your thoughts would be. This person says, I have 2 kids who just experienced the death of their mom. Both are in elementary school and seem to have totally different needs. How do I navigate this? How can adults navigating the differing grief needs of kids at the same time?
Yeah, my heart breaks for this family. My first thought is that I hope this listener also has support for themselves. Children's well-being is directly linked to the surviving parent's mental health and wellness, and sadly I've seen it more than I'd like to admit, where the surviving parent just pushes their grief to the side. That's not to say that's what I think is happening here, but that's kind of where my head first goes. I think it's important for this listener to, remind yourself that, like adults, each child will grieve in their own way and on their own timeline, like we've talked about. Recognize that there really is no one procedure or one formula that will fit all children. Mm-hmm. My advice to this listener is to be patient, be flexible, be willing to adjust to the individual needs. Adults can provide opportunities for children to mourn in healthy ways, but they should never force the kids to feel something before they're ready for the pain that precedes the healing. Mm-hmm. In the meantime, again, really important for you to model healthy grieving by allowing and validating emotional expression at home and just reminding the kids that your door is always open for whenever they want to have a conversation. Again, like we touched on earlier, an essential component of truly helping grieving children is to know that we don't have to have all the answers.
Yeah.
Right.
In the meantime, I would like to point out a couple resources to the listeners. The National Alliance for Children's Grief, NACG.org, has a complete library, lots of educational resources. There's also the Dougie Center in Portland, who puts out some incredible work. They also have a podcast, Grief Out Loud podcast, which I highly recommend listening to. And then Sesame Street. The Sesame Street website is coming up with some really good videos with the littles to help start the conversation around death and dying.
Mm-hmm. Those are great strategies. I'm thinking about, in response to this listener, that sometimes one of the greatest things we can do as adults is help shore up the village to surround our kids, knowing that the grief experiences are going to be unique and different and potentially at the exact same time. Mm-hmm. And if this is a person who is a caregiver to 2 kids who just experienced the death of their mom, in moments of functioning for yourself, seek to build the village for your household. Mm-hmm. And give yourself grace and compassion in doing that, knowing that it is a village that will surround you in the unique grief needs.
Yeah.
Yep. And to give yourself that permission to grieve in front of your children. I think so many parents say, well, I'm just going to cry alone away because the kids shouldn't see it. But I think when the kids see it, then they realize it's okay to be emotional. It's okay to feel the feels.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. You don't have to cry in the shower. You
right.
don't have to cry on the
It doesn't have to be a hidden or a secret.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point, Tara, that perhaps also this caregiver to the 2 kids could highlight, hey, we might all have different grief needs.
Yes.
Just bring it out into the open and recognize out loud that different moments might require different things for each of us. Mm-hmm. And none of those are right. None of those are wrong. Right. They just are. And we'll respond the best we can with what we have at the time. I think that's a really powerful message to say and just to continue to name. It's not a one and done either.
Right.
Certainly not.
Wow. We are at the end of our show already for today. I want to thank you all for listening this morning. Join us next week as we talk through dance movement therapy as an intervention for the moments when words don't cut it in processing emotions. And in the week ahead, be kind to yourself, everyone. Remember that connection fosters wellness, and your voice is one the world needs to hear. Share yourselves, friends.
I wanna feel just a little.